I'm so happy that you are on our channel. I'm so happy, even before you're on our channel, that you're on our staff. Do you want to tell people a little bit about how you got to the Institute and became Director of Programs?
Sure. Well, gosh.
We met when you were a teenager.
Yes, I was trying to figure out how far back you want me to go.
Texas A&M, what year, 2008?
We met in 2008. I discovered TOB on October 14th of 2007. But we met in March of 2008.
I discovered TOB. I know the date too.
Do you?
September 26th, 1993.
Okay, well, it makes me feel better because normally I tell people the date and they're like, oh.
No, it just means it's significant, right?
Yes, yes.
And you're on our team because this is significant to you as it is to me.
Yes, I know. I was like, are we fasting forward or rewinding back to October
we went
14th?
back to when we met, and you were part of, what was that thing you were part of at Texas A&M? The Revolution.
We started, the Revolution. The Revolution birthed from this group of us that got lit on fire with the Lord. In my memory, when I think back to that day, that moment, October 14th of 2007, it's like Pentecost. Like it's like the Holy Spirit came down like tongues of fire.
So did you ever think when you were 18 and you discovered Theology of the Body, did you see yourself as a 32-year-old married woman with 2 kids, with a master's in theology, a master's in counseling, working for the Theology of the Body Institute?
I sure didn't.
Here you are.
Here I am. I'm admittedly a very big dreamer. Like, people who know me, my people, they know that I dream really big. I did not have the courage to dream this big. Like, I knew I wanted to spread Theology of the Body. October 14, 2007, my whole life, like, it was one of those days that ripped my life into a before and after, right? Like, I knew from that point on why I was born into this time and this place. Like, the Lord just gave me this gift of knowing that I was meant to spread this message, but never did I think I'd like,
Well, here we are.
God is so good.
And we're on YouTube.
Okay.
And you know what?
On YouTube.
What we like to do, and I know you know this, is I don't know what we're going to talk about, but you do. So what are we going to talk about?
Okay. So we are going to talk about how you know if, well, from my perspective, how do women know if a guy really loves them?
How do women know? You're asking me?
Well,
how do women know?
I was going to talk about it. But then when I realized that we could do these videos, I was like, ooh, this would be a fun one to do with both of us.
Okay.
Because I'm a woman and you're not. And so you could talk about.
That is true.
That is so true. You could talk about, how you know if a gal really loves you. And it honestly, I think it's probably the same answers. But maybe they're not the same answers. So I think I want to talk about that because that's a question I've gotten a lot. Like, how do you know if it's real? And when you're discerning marriage, which is my thing, how do you know?
When you say this is your thing, tell our viewers a little bit about one of your specialties and where you focus your energies.
Sure. I love Theology of the Body applied to people who are discerning marriage. So I can give a little bit of backstory. When I was doing my theology master's and writing my thesis on TOB, I just started diving into writings of John Paul II. I knew I loved marriage and his stuff on marriage, but I was personally going through a catastrophic breakup at the time. A breakup that would have really benefited from someone just helping us figure out, like ask some good questions in advance because we would have broken up way earlier and it wouldn't have been as traumatic. So as I discovered, there was this chunk in this document he wrote called Familiaris Consortio, and he lists off marriage prep before you get engaged. And I was like, this is it. Yeah. So then I wrote my thesis on that pretty much. But I basically devoted the rest of my professional life to that in particular.
So from personal experience of going through a painful breakup where you wish somebody would have been there to help out.
Oh yeah.
This is kind of what birthed your particular focus with Theology of the Body.
Oh yeah.
And your particular interest in this question.
Yes.
How can a man know if a woman really loves him? And how can a woman know if a man really loves him? Do you want to go first?
I would not. I want to go first.
Well, initially I thought you were asking me, how does a woman know?
No.
You're asking me, how does...
I just want to talk about it.
Let's start from this perspective. How can anyone know if you're in a relationship where there is love upon which you can build a marriage that will last? Is that what we're getting at?
Yeah, that's great.
Upon which you could build a life.
Yeah.
All right, so I am rereading right now for I don't know how many, whatever time this is. I'm going through Love and Responsibility again. So some of this stuff is pretty fresh in my mind. And John Paul II's book, which he wrote before he became Pope, called Love and Responsibility, he dives into these layers of experience that all human beings have in relationships that just shine a bright light on this stuff. He walks through love as attraction, love as desire, love as goodwill or benevolence, and it's not that we typically even use these terms, but what he's doing, he's putting terms to our own experiences, right? So human relationships typically begin, certainly male-female relationships typically begin with attraction. There's something you are attracted to, something you are drawn to in the person. And that creates a desire. You see something good in this other that you want to experience, you want to partake in. So that attraction leads to desire. But if attraction and desire do not lead to benevolence, and what do we mean by that? When we have a desire for someone, we have the attraction, then we have the desire. The desire says, I long for you as a good for me, right? That's the desire stage. But the benevolent stage, or the stage of goodwill, is not only I long for you as a good for me, but I long for your good.
That's where I was hoping you would get.
And I'm ready and willing to sacrifice myself to uphold your good.
Yes.
John Paul II calls these things, like the emotions that are tied with desire and attraction, he calls those the raw material of love. Isn't that good?
That's really good.
And
I love him.
When somebody puts something into words and you say,
You're like,
I felt that, but now I have words to describe
Yes.
it and talk about it. These are the raw materials of love. They can be built into love, beginning with benevolence, right? But they're not love itself, these raw materials. And the danger, he says, and this I know it resonates in my life, it resonates in what I know of just human realities. We often confuse, he says, the raw materials of love with its finished form. And when we do that, when you try to build a life on attraction and desire, without having moved to benevolence, and then there's another stage of friendship, right? Friendship is when there's a mutual desiring of the other's good. But spousal love goes even beyond friendship, where the other's good is so important to you that you are ready to make the sacrifice and gift of not just your time every once in a while, but your entire life. That's how we get to the spousal dimension of love, the specific kind of love we call spousal love. Attraction, desire, goodwill or benevolence, right? I desire you not just because you're good for me, but I desire your good, and I'm ready and willing to sacrifice for it. Now we have the building blocks that can lead to a solid friendship, and from there we can build to building a life on a solid foundation. If we don't have those building blocks, that raw material in place, and you try to build a life on that, John Paul II says, what you thought was love is an illusion. And as soon as, if I'm only at the stage of desire, I desire you as a good for me. I desire something in you because you please me. Well, if you're building a life on that, guess what? Eventually those things fade. The attraction goes away, the things that please me, maybe now you're getting on my nerves. And if I don't have friendship and benevolence and friendship behind my spousal love, then I don't really have spousal love. I have a utilitarian attitude. I'm in this relationship because of what I get out of it, and as soon as I'm not getting out of it anymore what I thought I deserved in it, bye-bye, I'm going to go find my pleasure elsewhere.
But what I think, I'm very, very passionate about giving people practical things to do, because I think that's great. And I think people need to understand that and know that. But how does that manifest, in your relationship or discerning marriage? Yeah. And I have ideas too, but I appreciate that you would also probably have some. So
go for it. Launch.
Okay, so one of the things that I think that gift of self would manifest in, honestly, is chastity, right?
Absolutely.
So I think that if someone is willing to be chaste as abstinence, right, when you're not married, that's what chastity means. You have chastity your whole life, but when you're not married, it manifests as abstinence, right? So when someone is willing to be abstinent for you, not because they don't have any sexual desire for you, but because they have sexual desire and recognize
they want the good. Exactly. They desire the good.
Yes.
And John Paul says we have to rehabilitate this word.
Yes.
Because we think of it as a big no.
Yes.
It's a yes to the dignity and goodness of the person. So practically, what does that look like?
What does that look like? And so I think that when someone is willing to sacrifice that big desire to have sex with you, that is a big way that you can know that the love is authentic.
Yes,
so I'm
yes.
not saying that the people who are having sex don't have authentic love, but I think if they were challenged with, I think that they are recognizing this good, but they don't recognize that that good ought to be subordinated to a greater good. So if you guys are having sex, not you guys are having sex, you're married. If you guys are having sex, I think it's important to have these conversations about, maybe show them this video, like what is the purpose of that deep desire that you have? And if you get to a point with someone where they're not willing to stop, that is a big red flag.
Yes.
Like, even if they don't believe it themselves, they should respect that you believe it, and that should be enough for them. And if it's not enough for them, I would say that the love is not authentic. That is a hard thing. I probably shouldn't have led with the hardest thing.
No,
but
this is very important. You made a very good distinction. You're not saying that those who are engaged in premarital sex don't have some elements of authentic love.
Right.
But we can say that that act is not authentic love.
Right.
It demonstrates, in fact, the lack of benevolence. It demonstrates the lack of a desire for the good of the other, even when it costs me.
Yes.
And if you don't have that to build a relationship on that, John Paul II says, the illusion of love will burst like a bubble.
Does he use a language? Does he say burst like a bubble?
It will burst like a bubble.
I love him. What are the Polishes for
And
that?
and then you're left with a void, right?
Yeah.
You have these tensions and conflicts where you realize what we built a life on is not a solid foundation.
Yes.
He says this takes us to the very root of the tensions, struggles, and difficulties between men and women in their learning to love one another.
Amen. So I did one. Why don't you do one, and then we'll wrap up the video. What is one practical thing that can tell you that whether or not the person really loves you?
Yeah. Well, money is another big one.
Okay.
In a relationship. Sex is a biggie. Money's a biggie. Benevolence with your money would indicate a readiness and willingness to sacrifice maybe something you want to do with your money for the good of the other and what he or she wants to do with that money. We could look at even our day-to-day, what do we do with our time? Mm-hmm. Benevolence would show a sacrificial willingness, say, it's movie night, for your date. Are you ready and willing to see the movie that the other wants to see? I
love it.
And sacrifice what you might want?
I love it.
Right? A willingness to sacrifice what I want for the good of the other is an indication of benevolence.
Beautiful.
And it's not that we all struggle with, I know when Wendy wants to see a certain movie and I want to see a different movie, there's a little battle in there, right?
Yeah.
To be benevolent.
Yeah.
And sometimes we're more benevolent than other times. But in the overarching thrust of the relationship, not that you won't find selfishness in you at some points, but the overarching direction has to be a ready willingness to sacrifice what I want for the good of the other. If it ain't there, you don't have a foundation on which to build real love.
Yep, and I think that people who are discerning marriage, even just that litmus test will tell them a lot, because I think that will give people a lot to think about, both from the kind of theoretical, what JP2 was saying, but also the practical, like, can I examine my relationship in this lens? So
we have so much more to share with you on this channel. Check out our other videos, and if you enjoyed what you saw here today, share it with others and consider subscribing.